Ben Harris-Quinney is chairman of the Bankrupt, the world's oldest conservative think tank. Good afternoon to you, Ben. We haven't got long, 1.5 degrees, crucial time. It's around the corner. We've got to act, and if we don't act, half the world disappears.
Yeah, I mean, it's total nonsense. I think if you go back through every single one of these apocalyptic predictions, for example, Al Gore's 2006 prediction that by 2013 there would be no ice in the Arctic, New York City would be underwater, they never ever come true. And I understand why these people do these things, because, you know, if they said, well, there might be something happening in 200 years' time, we're not really sure, therefore you've got to completely tank your living standards and massively increase taxation, no one's going to go for it. So they've got to say this stuff about the world's going to end in 10 years, but it absolutely isn't. And I encourage your listeners to go back and look through these litany of predictions over the last 50 years, all which have proven to be untrue. I think what is certainly true is that these measures that the government is proposing, we've now transitioned from a point where you're making the very easy argument of let's improve our environment. Everyone agrees with that. And now we're starting to get to the reality, which, to be fair to them, Extinction Rebellion and groups like that have been talking about for some time, which is that if you adopt these measures, you are talking about no more foreign travel, meat will become a rare luxury, having your own car is going to be unlikely, you're going to have to live in much closer proximity to other people for a more carbon efficient future. You know, if you challenge what the Green Lobby is saying in terms of the apocalyptic predictions they are making and say, so what would life have to change to in order for these predictions to be averted, you are talking about decimating most people's lives and livelihoods in the United Kingdom. And what we see consistently, in fact, there was a poll done for the Daily Mail recently that showed that, again, most people support the idea of having a nicer environment. But when you start talking about the costs, which this government, the British government, is yet to really do in any detail, people's support completely changes. And we saw that with the Gilets jaunes protests in France, where Macron talked a good game about the environment. Then when he started laying down levies and taxes and costs on the population, France pretty much entered into a national revolt. So I think that is going to be the way things go, that once the reality of these policies start hitting home, the British public will reject them wholeheartedly.
Why would Extinction Rebellion then want to make this stuff up? Why would they want to live in a world where you can drive your car less, not go on holidays via a plane, live in close proximity and give up meat? What's in it for them to advance that argument?
Well, I think a lot of them began from a point of being environmentalists. I consider myself an environmentalist. Almost all of the time I spent in elected politics was trying to protect the green belt. And I very much believe in protecting our natural environment. It's rather odd that the government talks very little about that, and all of their policies are actually about concreting over the green belt. So I don't think, you know, a lot of these people have malevolent aims, but I do think Margaret Thatcher put it best, who was also an environmentalist herself, who said what we must avoid is the push for a clean environment and protecting Britain's natural heritage being used as an excuse for communism and global socialism. And I think a lot of these people that are involved in the Green Lobby are just rebranded communists and rebranded socialists and want to achieve their economic vision for the world via these means.
They would point you, Ben, they would point you to the various climate reports on climate change, which says that, you know, this 1.5 degree danger zone is just around the corner if we don't act. Are all the scientists making it up?
Well, I would point them to all the projections of the past which have proved to be untrue. And we can see similar trends with other projections, you know, as per the pandemic, that often prove to be untrue. As I say, I think there's a lot right with protecting Britain's natural environment. I find it very hard to believe that anything we do in this country will have any effect on the global climate. I think it will affect our environment at home directly, but I very much doubt it will have any effects on global temperatures. And if you look at the last million years, often these reports look very short run. But if you look at the last million years, which is still a very short period in terms of the life of this planet, you see a consistent cycle over roughly 100,000 years of temperatures rising and falling to a far greater degree than 1.5 degrees. You know, you're talking about a swing of 20 degrees. We've had ice ages that humanity has lived through despite having far less technology than they do now. So I would completely reject any notion that this is going to be the end of the world. You know, the world has had meteorites hit it and all sorts. And I completely reject any notion that this will be the end of humanity either. So I think the apocalyptic side of the debate is complete nonsense. It should be rejected. I encourage everyone to look at the past predictions and look how untrue they've proven to be.
Ben, stay with us, Ben. Let me just put some of that to Laura Baldwin, our other guest, former Olympian, now spokesperson for Extinction Rebellion. I mean, just to address that first point, Laura, I mean, Ben's onto something there. I touched on it with our chat earlier that, I mean, we have had lots of predictions back to the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. Ben mentioned Al Gore there. A lot of doomsday scenarios that simply never happened. Why is this one different?
It is happening. You just look at your news this summer, and the scientists are saying that actually these floods, fires, wild, heat waves are happening 70 years, decades ahead of when they were predicted to happen. That the models were actually slower than they are going quicker, and the models were slower than they were predicting. So actually it's worse than was predicted.
Ben, can you
so there's that point. The second point...
Just respond to that, Ben, if you could.
My best friend lives in New York. I spoke to her last night. By all accounts, I'm sure she would have mentioned if she was underwater, which is what Al Gore predicted. Predicted by this time New York will be underwater and the Arctic is ice-free. So not only have these predictions proven to be total nonsense, the idea that they're happening faster than predicted is just complete nonsense.
And Laura, that is the issue, though, Laura, isn't it? That it's very hard when, what Ben says there is quite compelling, even if you do have an answer to that. And that's the message people take from this, isn't it? What happened to the Al Gore prediction of doom?
It's important that they don't take that message, because that's distracting from the fact that many of the predictions are happening way quicker than.
But they didn't happen. That's Ben's point. They demonstrably didn't happen.
The one thing I learned from being an Olympic sailor is it's very, very difficult to predict the weather. And we're dealing with unknowns. It's scientists doing their best job to try and predict things. And they're warning us with no doubt that we are facing a code red for humanity, that we must act now on this. So we need to not be discussing, is it happening, should we act on it? We absolutely must act on it.
Okay,
we need to take the precautionary principle and keep ourselves safe. It says if there's a risk of something happening, then we should act to ensure that risk doesn't.
So there, it's not. We don't get two goes at this, Ben. So we might as well go for it. If there's a risk there, and those predictions, not necessarily 100%, but they are there, and we can now see with extreme weather conditions, burning fires, floods in Germany, Italy, and all the rest of it, that these things are, in fact, coming to fruition.
Well, actually, again, I encourage people to look at the truth and the facts rather than these extraordinary scenarios that are presented. If you look at the facts, deaths due to the climate, due to environmental phenomena, were 10 times higher in 1920, and the global population was obviously far less in 1920. So the idea that, the world's on fire, everyone's dying, again, it's total nonsense. So I really would encourage the Green lobby, who I think have got some good points, if they would just focus on what is going on domestically, if they'd focus on stopping the government building all over the Green Belt, if they'd focus on stopping mass immigration, which is driving 80% of the population increase in the United Kingdom, there'd actually be a lot of common ground that I think most of the country could agree on. But by making these apocalyptic scenarios that anyone is now able to research and see that they prove time and time again to be false, as I keep saying, they are making a rod for their own backs. And it's no good saying, people shouldn't listen to that, people should ignore it.
Okay.
That is the truth. If you're telling people to ignore the truth, you've got a big problem with your debate.
And Laura, let me just put another point to you that Ben raised, and that is, behind the mask of Extinction Rebellion is a cartel of socialists and communists who actually want to change the world in different ways, and they've simply found a mechanism and a platform to do that. The ultimate enemy, if you like. The left loves an enemy. It exists only when there's someone to shout at. And you guys have found it perfectly. But if we remove the mask of XR, what's under there is essentially a Marxist organisation. They've got other ideas about how humans should live. True or false?
No, absolutely false. No, the climate crisis doesn't care about your political orientation. Extinction Rebellion don't care about your political orientation. We welcome everybody. We all face this together. And we know that everybody has differing opinions. So our solution to it, we haven't stepped, as a movement, has not said that you can't fly, you can't eat meat. We don't come forward and say the solutions to the problem. Our demand is for a citizens' assembly to bring ordinary people, everybody representing the demographic together to discuss what the best solutions are.
That's quite Marxist-like, isn't it? I don't use that as a pejorative, but this idea of this kind of community, people deciding, it's got a sort of vague Orwellian thing to that. You end up with chaos, don't you? We've already got elected individuals, whether it's in local councils or in Westminster. We already do that.
And unfortunately, they are lobbied and they have self-interest. And they're just representing themselves really, and their agendas, and the majority of them are part of an elite, upper class group of people. A citizens' assembly would enable
I don't think the majority
every
of them
demographic of the population to come together. It's democracy.
I think
all right, final word, Ben.
If you want to see an elite, okay, that are imposing their views on the world and on domestic populations, look at COP26. Look at the people streaming in with 85-car motorcades and private jets. There's your elite, okay? So this idea that the people pushing this stuff are in some way an underclass is the complete opposite of the truth. I would actually agree with Extinction Rebellion if what they're proposing is a public referendum. I think what needs to happen is the government needs to publish the costs and restrictions that are going to be necessary if they bring forward these measures. And because it will be the most expensive policy, perhaps the most consequential policy in British history, I think we should have a referendum on it, and we'll see what the public say.
You can't put a price on people's lives, though. You're asking, we can't afford to do this. We can't afford not to do it.
But it would be good, Laura, wouldn't it? It'd be good to have, if everything, if people, you're saying people are going to die, then we would need the evidence for that and need things costed out.
Germany, China, Canada, every continent of the globe, people died this year. It's happening. But we need to not focus on that. We need to look at the solution and make it something that is going to be what everybody wants. I given the choice of life or death.
Okay, I know. All right. I think both of you have had a good chomp at the apple on this one. Thank you, Laura Baldwin, spokesperson for Extinction Rebellion. Ben Harris-Quinney with a slightly different view, although with sympathies for wider environmental arguments, chairman of the Bow Group.